Okay, so I was just randomly scrolling through my YouTube feed until I saw this video where it's a Q&A with Students for Life, which, if you didn't know, is a pro-life organization that goes around making videos and having various talks around college campuses. Which, of course, I think is ridiculous since the position of pro-life itself is ridiculous. Sorry, yes, I know you're going to hear me again rambling about abortion rights, but I still think this is an important topic since we shouldn't forget about it just because some time has passed after Roe v. Wade was abolished. Anyway, two speakers from Students for Life has been oh so kind to do a Q&A, so let's have a look at specifically this one student interaction with them.
Hiya, so I have a little bit of a silly question, but have y'all ever played the hit game Among Us?
Indeed, I have, but since this part isn't relevant to the main topic of discussion, let's skip forward a bit.
What does your sign say?
Oh my gosh, I made it this morning. Oh my gosh, I love your Among Us phone case. It's very, very good.
I have the fetus. What?
To Yeetus the Fetus, or not to Yeetus, is not the question the government should dictate, but the individual's choice.
Could you define Yeetus the Fetus for us?
Oh my gosh, Yeetus the Fetus is like one of my fave pro-choice memes. Basically, there was a Vine years ago, I think 2014, where there was someone who threw an empty soda can and went yeet. So then it just kind of became synonymous with the action of, I guess, first throwing things and then in a metaphorical sense of being liberated of something.
So you'd be comfortable yeeting a baby?
Oh, 100%.
A born baby?
Not like a born baby, because that'd make me a criminal.
But what's the difference?
Okay, funny meme. Yes, Yeetus the Fetus. It rhymes, it's hilarious, but personally, I wouldn't even go through the effort of explaining this meme to people who are hardcore pro-life. I mean, think about it. Within the pro-choice community, it's a funny meme, but this is more of an inside joke, so if you explain it to people who are on the opposition side, they're just going to think we're weird. That being said, though, it's a pretty funny meme. People who are older probably aren't going to know what yeet means, but it's just a hilarious way to say throw something, but in this case, it really just means to get rid of. Do I think women should have the right to Yeetus the Fetus? Absolutely. Keyword fetus, not baby. See how the pro-life presenters there started with the word baby even though the sign clearly says fetus? Yeah, just another way to twist the meaning and consequently the thing of discussion in order to further their ideologies. Anyway, again, funny meme. I personally wouldn't try to explain it to pro-life activists though.
So your governor here, your pro-choice Republican governor, Chris Sununu, we just defeated a proposal in the legislature. He wanted to legalize abortions up until the moment of birth. What is the fundamental difference 10 minutes before birth and 10 minutes after? Why would yeeting a child who's only been out of the vaginal canal for 10 minutes be different than aborting a child?
Because we care about humanity.
Indeed, once again, I wouldn't answer this with, why do you care? Of course, the answer to that is that they think they're doing humanity a service and they think they're saving lives. Of course, in reality, they're doing the exact opposite, but that's what they're going to tell you. So if you kind of just dismiss their question like that, they're going to think you have no good response to it. Now, it's not like debating like this is going to change anyone's minds. Humans are stubborn people, and we rarely change our positions on a certain topic. Those who do are often the most open-minded people. So if I'm ever debating a pro-life activist, I wouldn't be trying to convince them specifically, but rather the spectators. There's an audience in this room, and if they were neutral, seeking a position to side with, those would be the people I'm trying to convince. It's similar to my YouTube channel here. I'm not trying to convince or change the position of the person I respond to, but rather I try to change the position of those who watch my videos, aka you guys. And in the setting of this video we're looking at here, there's quite a few people in the audience. So if I were given the question of what's the difference between a fetus 10 minutes before birth and a baby after birth, I would give a serious response. Okay, enough ranting about that. Let's actually answer the question. First of all, up until birth means up until the fetus or the baby is no longer dependent on the mother to survive, or in other words, the baby is able to live on its own independently. So once the fetus is independent, it is technically no longer part of the woman's body. This distinction is crucial in medical procedures because if the fetus needs to be removed for whatever reason, perhaps it's posing a risk to the mother's health or anything really, then whether or not we do an abortion or delivery depends entirely on the fetus's independent viability. And that there is the distinction. We here are just removing the fetus from the mother's womb. Once we do remove the fetus, if it is able to live independently, then fantastic, we just gave birth. But if it is not, then it will die, and that's an abortion. In the case of dying, we didn't, quote, kill the fetus. It just couldn't live on because it wasn't independently viable. We didn't necessarily change the procedure, so there's not much difference between a baby being born and a fetus 10 minutes prior. Of course, at the end of the day, this point is useless to discuss because there isn't just a switch that is flipped once independent viability is attained. It's never that the fetus is dependent until an exact second or minute that we can identify where it becomes independent. This whole thing is a gradient, and viability itself has different degrees. You can be viable but not healthy, or you'll die within a few minutes or hours or maybe even years. So comparing that 10 minutes before birth isn't reflective of reality. Second of all, if you're trying to blur the line between a fetus and a baby here, you pro-lifers are the biggest offenders to making something black and white. If you say we can't draw a distinction between a fetus 10 minutes prior and a baby being born, then at the same time I could flip the switch on you and say you can't tell the difference between a sperm and egg cell compared to a zygote. Seriously, what's the difference? And why does life begin at conception? What's the switch being flipped here? If you're so adamant on blurring the lines, then blur it all the way, because there's nothing that happens biologically during conception that defines specifically that that is where life begins.
Once you know evil is happening, I think it's pretty evil if you don't stand up to defeat it.
I love it how some pro-lifers actually genuinely think they're doing good in the world. If they just opened their eyes and looked at reality for what it is, read scientific papers, experienced the science of women's healthcare, they would know that what they're doing is nothing but damage. That being said, the general feeling I get from pro-life activists now aren't actually to, quote, save the lives of babies, but rather I feel like most of the ones I encountered are pro-life because it gives them a feeling of moral high ground, and they then use it to look down or feel superior to others.
And we know abortion is a discriminatory act of violence where the privileged person gets to say whether or not the weaker, younger person gets to survive depending on whatever they have going on in their life. And we think that is discrimination, it's violence, and it's wrong. And once you understand that, you're called to speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. It's a very fundamental principle. It's one of the best things about our country is that we stand up and speak for the most vulnerable in our world. Even if they don't live here in America, we're the most charitable country in the world, sending troops, sending foreign aid across the world.
Oh, how absolutely generous of you to speak up to protect a discriminated group of people. Two things I want to point out here. First of all, disallowing abortions, by your logic, would actually be discrimination towards the mother. The fetus is the one leeching off the mother's body here. If the mother does not consent, the fetus should not have the right to parasite off another's life. Cutting off the fetus's leeching is not the same as the fetus minding its own business and we just came in and killed it. Second of all, I find it absolutely hilarious that you even dare to use the word discrimination here. You want to know what real discrimination is like? When abortion is restricted, guess what group of people it negatively impacts the most? That's right, people with lower socioeconomic status and minorities. So if you want to talk about true discrimination, that there is it.
But like, what if I don't want to give birth and shouldn't that be my choice to not?
Well, you can choose not to engage in heterosexual sex.
Both of my girlfriends are transgender. I am non-binary. I have a vagina, right?
Okay, so you can choose not to engage in sex with a penis and a vagina.
Yeah.
Without protection. But even with protection, because we know that that's not entirely foolproof. Yeah.
Ridiculous. I've heard this argument so many times. Just don't have sex. You're an idiot. People are going to have sex because it's just the natural things animals do. Sex is built into humans' natural biology and you can't just not have sex. So obviously the best thing would be to use contraceptives, which are very effective. But the issue is that people aren't often educated enough to know about them or they can't afford them, which is why the right solution to reducing the number of abortions is to increase sexual education and access to contraceptives. Speaking of which, recently the FDA is making birth control an over-the-counter drug, so you won't have to get a prescription from a doctor here in the United States, which I think is a step in the right direction. I always thought birth control being prescription-based was stupid. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. We can definitely increase contraceptive access and education, but abortion cannot be off the table due to the problems I mentioned earlier. You'll never stop people from having sex. Therefore, given that, how are you going to increase the quality of life of women in the country? The obvious answer is, in addition to contraceptives, make abortions and women's reproductive health care in general easily accessible and legal.
You don't have a fundamental right to choose to engage in behaviors that we know in natural consequence is creating a unique co-living human life and then take back that consent.
Why would I not want to have sex? Like, that's kind of boring.
Yeah, I know. Sex is awesome.
Sex
Did you
is
know
awesome.
married pro-life religious people actually have the best sex lives?
I'd like a source for that because I don't believe a single word of it. Imagine always worrying about potentially getting a pregnancy. With that on the back of your minds, I doubt you'd have good sex. Not saying they have worse sex, I just doubt they have the best.
What are the
still gonna be a
consequences
circle.
of sex between a penis and a vagina? There are many, but what are just some?
You know what, I'm exhausted. Like, adios.
Okay.
Anyway, so my last 2 cents, which I've already said, I don't think that behavior is a good one. Yes, it's fun to mock pro-lifers and it feels good to be rude to them, but at the very least I would answer the questions using science and logic. Because again, the people you're trying to convince is not your debate opponents, but rather anyone who is listening in. And if I came into this debate here and I didn't know the first thing about abortions, it'd be hard to side with the student here. Anyway, that's the end of the video today. I'm going on vacation soon. Not sure exactly when relative to the release of this video that is, but there's a chance I'll be gone for a week or two. But I don't really think that would really interrupt video release schedules on my channel. Thank you to the usual folks over at Patreon, Fireshard, Alan Morton, Miss Fixit, and Rick Clan, and I'll see you later.